That's right. We're back, Survival Worldwide, with another episode here of Island of the Secrets. We're going to be recapping episodes 12 and 13 tonight. So myself and Riley, we've decided to go back to doing 2 episodes per recap because we both got really excited seeing the Survivor Immunity Island contestants being dropped this week. So we've got a bit of work to do there. So if you're dropping into this and you're thinking, why are these guys talking about Island of Secrets when they could be talking about Immunity Island? Riley and myself will be doing something over the weekend that will be going into the cast, and we'll give you guys our first impressions on who we think will be able to outplay, and outlast the rest of the contestants. Riley, tell us about what's going on your end. I've been, a little birdie told me you were sent home early today.
Yeah, well, COVID has struck back in New South Wales here in Australia. Only 2 new cases, so much better than everywhere else in the world, but remaining precautious at the moment. Really excited to talk about Immunity Island possibly on the weekend. But yeah, first of all, we're going to lay the groundwork with Rob Bentelle's game and all the other cast this year and see what people in Immunity Island are going to be thinking going into this next season of Survivor. So really excited, and 2 big episodes as well. Lots of strategy and wheeling and dealing here, especially from someone like Dante as well. Lots of alliances being tested and broken at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. So we start this episode off with Jark being on the island, a little bit traumatized by what's just happened the night before. He says that his closest ally has just been gunned down in cold blood next to him. And love these confessionals, these one-liners from Jark. He always has a very graphic and visual mind in regards to, I don't think anybody else can explain their closest ally getting voted out of the game the way that Jark can explain it in his confessionals, right?
He's given some great one-liners. I really like the analogies he was giving last week about the lions and the zebras. But yeah, no, Jark and Corbus were left out of the vote by Rob. They weren't privy to the plan there. And ultimately, Jark is starting to feel as though the Spitshake 7 isn't quite as strong as he thought. He's starting to recognize that perhaps my alliance isn't as strong as it is, and now potentially I need to start making moves. We know obviously Jark held onto the island idol in the last episode, so he's still got that security blanket. But I mean, not knowing where the vote lies, that's a very big concern for Jark. He does have that idol, as I said, but him and Corbus really have a lot of scrambling to do now that CP is gone, and he no longer really can trust Rob as much as he used to. And this Spitshake 7 is ultimately starting to crumble a little bit. So he really needs to find where his next path leads.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it's interesting because Corbus says here that he's been shocked here as well, and he doesn't even almost want to talk to them about, where the vote went, and he's quite annoyed with Jark as well, and he was in the blind or in the dark as well. And the other really interesting one is Darrell sitting there in camp and saying that he wanted to show her something, and this is something that Darrell has said a few times, like when he voted out Felix as well, he said that to Nicole and Meryl that he wanted to show him something, so it's one of his favorite lines to use. But I was thinking to myself, I really don't understand, and I wish we had Sipe on the show. She couldn't make it sadly this week, but she will at some point talk to us. She does want to do this still. And one of the questions I definitely want to ask Sipe is how it went so wrong here with Darrell, because Darrell clearly was not in the ins. And if you had to pinpoint one thing in Sipe's game that got her voted out of the island, it would have been not maintaining that relationship with Darrell, who ended up flipping over to the other side where he could have been her confidential informant, and he ended up being the confidential informant for Rob in this case, and bringing all the information to Rob. Like we'll see, even in this episode, Darrell goes back to Rob quite a few times to tell him about what's going on. Now, there is an interesting scene here with Rob taking both Corbus and Jark to the beach, having a conversation with them. And he says that, listen, Sipe was turning against the alliance. I needed to cut her. There wasn't enough time to talk to you guys. And, Corbus, you were away on the island of secrets. I couldn't talk to you. And Jark says, but I was here the whole day. Why didn't you talk to me? And there's this confessional from Jark as well, where he says that, while he's out there providing for the tribe, trying to get food and things, the girls are laying on the beach and they're, blindsiding him and keeping him out of social play, which is really annoying. And I think that, if you're Jark or Quivers, the writing really at this point is already on the wall, and they should be seeing the freight train coming. It's on its way, and it's got a lot of momentum against them at this point.
And it seems like Dante is really the only one that's sort of recognizing that at this point. We saw when he got back from tribal council, he obviously really unleashed on camp and said, Rob's controlling this game. We've got to, look at who the strongest player on the board is here. He really can't find his alliance, and perhaps there's an opportunity for him going forward to go with Jark and Corbus, or does Jark try to build back up his trust with Rob, even though he's just been blindsided? It really is a curious predicament for Jark to try and scramble off the bottom. But you're right in saying that, Rob has kind of left them blind here. And it is really that coalition that we saw at the original Saula tribe that are building this strength here. And even though Corbus did bond with Nicole at the Island of Secrets in the last episode, and they did seem to get a little bit closer, it seems like at the moment, Jark, Dante, and Corbus are really, there's three that are on the bottom. But I feel like Jark and Corbus at the moment are reluctant to work with Dante because they know that the all-powerful Rob is the one in charge. And if they go against him, then their position in the Spitshake 7, especially at this moment when he's got, 5 or 6 loyal people to him that are going to die on that hill no matter what, it seems. It's almost too hard to build up a case against Rob or even Nicole or Steffi at the moment. But yeah, we go into the reward challenge, and it's
just a quick question before you go into the reward.
Yep.
There, quick question for you: if you were in the Spit Shaker 7 and one of your people just got gunned down, your ally just got gunned down next to you like that, I mean, what's the incentive to stay with that alliance? Because they've already shown that they're going to turn against their own. And if you look at this, it's something that we see from one Survivor season to the other Survivor season all the time, where you've got this big majority alliance. They kill one of their own. They take somebody out from the outskirts. Then they kill someone in their own. They take someone from the outside, but they keep that outside alliance small. I think Harry spoke about this, or someone spoke about this. Yeah, I think it was Harry in the Champions versus Contenders 2 season, where he said that, there's this whole thing with someone being on the outside constantly and they're just being used for numbers. And in this case, I feel like Jark is enough of a student of the game that he should be looking at that and saying, I don't want anything to do with Rob or with Nicole. And them targeting Dante at this stage, to me, should have been massive red flags for both Corbus and Jark, because Dante is someone that actually will work against Nicole and Rob. Like he said it the whole time. He's never, ever, he's the one player that's not been under Rob's spell so far. How would you have reacted in that time? Like, am I being too critical here? Because I feel like it should have been blatantly obvious.
At this point, though, I think we have, is it 9 members, or 10, sorry, 9. That are still in the game.
10, yes.
And I mean, that alliance of 7 is almost impenetrable. Even if you take Jark and Corbus out of that, and you bring in Dante, that gives you 3. We know Jarrell at the moment is pretty loyal to that Spitshake 7. He's not going to go against them at this point. And we've seen that time and time again in these last couple of votes, that he's someone that if you go to him with a plan, he's ultimately just going to go back and tell Rob, and Rob's just going to, run the game from there. Even Mike, someone who was so loyal to Jeffrey, he switched his allegiance to Rob, knowing that Rob is going to be someone that can carry him to the end. So I don't know if there is a path for Jark and Corbus, but I think of Danny Boatwright's game in Guatemala, where she was on the bottom. Obviously, she was lucky to win immunity, and they had to start to cannibalize their own. But that's sort of what you got to let them do. You just got to sit back, try not to paint too big of a target on himself. And with someone like Dante, it's a little bit hard, as we're discussing this next reward challenge with him being such a physical threat and social threat as well. But you really want to take that target off yourself and start letting the others fight it out between them and start pinning targets on everyone else, and really fade them into the background a little bit, which I think is something that someone like Mike and Steffi are doing well at the moment. They're really sitting back and letting others take control and be those big people that are really controlling the vote, and they're the visible threats. So that's probably the way I try and get out of it. But if I'm someone like Dante or Corbus, who's a big physical threat, I don't think there's too much of an option there to really take your name off the plate without really dominating and trying to build an alliance. But at the moment, with people like Jarrell and Nicole so loyal to this Spitshake 7, I can't see any way that you can really penetrate that power at the moment.
No, it's a fair point. I do think that it's really tough, but it's going to bring up an interesting conversation when we get to the next reward challenge for the next episode, where people get an option to play for different things, and we'll revisit that a little bit later on. Now, we go into the reward challenge here, and the reward challenge is they've got to navigate cylinders through an obstacle course, and then gather more cylinders and move onto a puzzle at the end, where they put the cylinders in to actually complete a puzzle, which looked like it could be the Survivor logo or something there at the end, something that they needed to reconstruct. And we see that Dante, Nicole, Steffi, Rob, Jack, and Quibbers, they move on to the second round. They're the fastest through that first piece. And something that I found quite interesting is when they get to the second part of this challenge, they have to dig for cylinders in the sand. And in most survivors, when we see that, it's normally in a sand pit on the ground. But in this case, they actually had a structure built, and it was up in the air, which I just found that it was quite interesting. And probably the production did it because it was easier to hide them, or there might not have been a really good place for them to have them dig in the sand. But I always look at these challenges when it's digging in the sand, and I think to myself, it's pretty brutal when you haven't eaten for like 29 days and you're out there and you're having to do that. People don't realize how much physical energy you're going to exert to try and get those cylinders. But the final round comes down to Jark, Dante, and Rob going up against each other. And throughout this whole challenge, Dante, again, is just showing that he's an absolute physical threat. So not only is Dante, like you said, someone that is going to be extremely vocal throughout the season and someone that will talk against the powers that be and try and swim upstream, he's also someone that's not minimizing his threat level at all. And, Dante said prior to going into this reward challenge that he probably should rest in the reward challenge so he can go and play hard for the immunity, but he doesn't really follow that advice. And I don't blame him. I feel like this whole episode, Dante knew, like, listen, I've just got an absolute gigantic target on my back, and I'm not going to be able to shake it. So he was calm throughout the episode, which caused a lot of paranoia. But I feel like he thought, listen, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't, and I'd rather keep the reward away from others. But it's quite interesting when it gets to the point where they have to start, where he has to select people to go with him to the reward challenge.
Yeah, and I think it's almost a good opportunity to win that reward for Dante, because it does give him an opportunity outside of the game to take those people away from camp and away from Rob and try and lobby a plan. And we've seen this in the last couple of episodes where Dante has tried to come up with a plan, with Jeffrey and Corbus and these guys that are on the outs, and Dural, obviously, as well. But nothing really ever seems to stick. So, yeah, we do see that Dante brings along Letitia, Mike, and Mamba. Obviously, Mike is very loyal to Rob at this point, but still someone that I think is willing to make big moves. So I think that's a good choice. And then, obviously, Mamba is probably going to be the next one to go after Dante. And Letitia is one that isn't really too built into that alliance. So I think it's a good group for him to lobby to. And then if he can go back to camp and obviously bring over Jark and Corbus as well, it'll work in his favor to see if he can get rid of Rob. But obviously, he sends Dural to the Island of Secrets here, and Dural is presented with a bit of a quagmire. He can he loses his vote at the next tribal council, but he's given a clue to the next immunity challenge and a reward, and he has to memorize all these different sequences, which is a unique option. So I don't know, would you go for that, Chris, and risk losing your vote for a chance at winning immunity, even though you know that your position is so safe at the moment?
Yeah, it's a tough one, to be honest with you. And I mean, it's very circumstantial depending on how confident I feel in my alliance at that point in the game. Like if I felt, listen, my alliance has got my back, I'm in the majority alliance, I could potentially win the immunity, then maybe I would have gone for it. The big problem for me, though, is I feel like memory games isn't my best. Like I'm one of those people, like even at work, like I've got a notepad with me. I just finished work before the podcast. This thing goes everywhere with me during the day, and whatever I need to write something down to remember for later in the day, I write it down. I've got a really crappy memory, to be honest with you, so I don't know if it would have been the best for me. And I think that it's really funny seeing Dural do this challenge, because I think that if you ask someone beforehand, who's the person who's going to do the worst in a memory challenge, a lot of people would have selected Dural, because he just comes across as being the goofy character throughout the season. And a lot of that's due to editing, obviously, because I do think that there's a lot of things that Dural does extremely well throughout the season, and we're seeing it in regards to why he is so solidly placed or in that inner layer of the Onion alliance that they've got, because he is really well ingrained. But I do like him taking the option here, because I feel like Dural knows that they need to keep the immunity away from Dante at this stage. The people that he's working with, they're targeting Dante, so anybody else that can win it, that's good. And also Dural does say here that he's been wanting to win an immunity challenge for so long. It's something that he's really craving, because he knows that he needs to have a case at the end if he gets to the end. So it's something that he can put on his resume. One of the other things I wanted to touch on as well is a lot of the things that you said about Dante was great. Choosing the right people there, and Letitia and Mike and Mubba. Those are all people like Mike and Mubba are pretty close, so he's thinking he could work with them. Letitia is kind of in the outs, and I feel like Letitia, even in this reward itself, she says that she's someone that would love to go against the power structure at this stage, but it seems like there's never people there that will work with Letitia to give her the confidence to actually end up voting, because we know that Mike is at this point really close to Rob, and he's not going to turn against Rob. And that's one of the big reasons why I feel like this counter alliance never worked, because Rob had Mike really fooled and really with him throughout this whole game. But one of the things that Dante doesn't do so well here is that he actually says that he would have loved to have been on this reward challenge alone. So I feel like he's already starting off this whole, I don't think that he thought about this as a strategy to go and talk to them on this reward. I don't think he thought he could actually turn anybody around. I think he just tried to keep it away from the people that were closest to Rob, the food, which is petty, but I understand it. If I was in his position, I would have done exactly the same thing if I knew I was on the outs. But I feel like he just, again, lacks that social skills in this case to really bring them across. But I also don't think that he would have been able to really get them, because I feel like Mike is so ingrained within that Rob alliance.
Yeah, and as I said before, with Corpus and Jark trying to get into that spit shake 7 and maintain that alliance and break up Rob's power in the game, there really doesn't seem to be too much of an option. And with Rob having the immunity idol and Nicole having the other one, at the moment, they do have this power. And as well, Rob is a big physical threat. If you try targeting him and you miss, and he keeps winning immunities, then you're going to be screwed down the line. You don't want a big enemy going against you. So I do think it is too early at the moment with 10 people for these people that feel as though they'll, someone like Mike, who will probably go to 5 or 6, and Letitia as well, someone that they can bring along as an extra number. For them, there's really not too much of an incentive right now to be brought to the end, because they know that if they stay loyal to Rob, they can obviously assure themselves a spot in the final 7 at least, and hopefully the 6, 5, 4 even. And that can be them when they begin to strike and start to go up against him and try and get rid of him. But Corpus and Jark, they really do play that angle with Rob and say, we're loyal even though you blindsided us at the last tribal council. And they say to Rob, we are going to make sure we win immunity here, because we don't want Dante to win and we want to get him out. And I suppose a little bit of that as well is them knowing that if Dante wins immunity, they're probably the next ones on the chopping block as well. But it is a smart move for them to just reinforce their loyalty to Rob and make sure that he knows that they're fully trusting of him and they want to go to the end with him, even though they might not truly feel that way. And I think even Rob's skeptical at this point. But I think the target here right now is to just make sure that Dante doesn't win immunity, and then they can go forward, get rid of Dante, and then they can worry about things after that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we do have to give Dante credit for here is that he does end up agreeing to vote out Quibus in the spot. So, I mean, he's finally learned that he can't dictate the votes when he doesn't have the social capital to be able to dictate it. So I think that for a brief second there, Mike was actually on board, and a few people thought, okay, cool, we can now use Dante as a number to take out Quibus, because I do feel like one of Mike's potential weaknesses in this game is that, he's saying, I'm going to use Rob as a shield to be out there in front of me. I'm going to let him think he makes all the decisions and all that kind of things. But at the end of the day, at some point, you've got to weaken Rob's hold on the game, when you've got Rob there with all of his mates towards the end, Rob's dictating the votes all the way. So if you can't take a strike at the king directly, then take a strike at one of his allies, because I do think that a few people know Rob has got an idol. So that's another thing that plays in their head when they're thinking about voting for Rob, is what if he knows everyone, he's getting a lot of the information. What if he plays the idol and I'm seen as someone that tried to vote him out? So I feel like they do need to shift and try and focus on some other people. I just think Quibus is the wrong person, because Quibus, we know by the end of the second episode, was never really in Rob's inner plans for who he wanted to take deep into the game. So even if they did take out Quibus in this spot, I don't know if it would have changed anything that much. Now, another scene that we have here is with Steffi, again, making sure that everybody gets enough nutrients while the other people are on the rewards. She's making sure everybody gets banana, a lot of rice. She wants to make sure that if the others are going to go eat well on the reward, that they're also getting their fair share of food in the camp. We also see Rob here using classic Boston Rob tendencies that's coming out, and it's about creating a common enemy and getting everybody else within the group angry enough at this common enemy so that they're not focusing on him or anybody that he cares about in this game. And he says here that the common enemy is Dante, because he's going to win all the challenges, he's going to win all the food. That's taking away from everybody else. And he also mentions here that they've just taken out Batman. So what do you do after you've taken out Batman? You got to take out Robin. So Robin, in this case, being Jark, he's the last remaining sidekick to Cipe, still remaining here in the game. And he's trying to set up the next play as well. And it's going to be interesting going here into the immunity challenge, because in the immunity challenge, the only thing that they need to do is prevent Dante from winning the immunity, and they're laughing all the way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one that Dante doesn't exactly succeed in there. Obviously, a memory challenge, you'd expect that Dante would dominate those physical challenges, but unfortunately for him, it was a memory challenge, and he couldn't quite remember his seahorses and distinguish them from the palm trees there. And obviously, Jarrell, with that big advantage on Island of Secrets, goes on to win individual immunity. Much to everyone's surprise, they start to think, well, maybe he did get a bit of an advantage there on Island of Secrets. What really happened? And when he returned, he confirmed that with Rob, that he was given that option. And unfortunately, he won't have a vote in the next Tribal Council. But knowing that Dante hasn't won immunity, I think they're safe here to make up their own concoction. And really, we start to see that Rob and Steffi begin to try and plant seeds and try and make sure that, Dante is still our target, but we also want to make Jark feel insecure, because we know he has an idol and we want to get rid of him as soon as possible, which is a good move on their part to really start to plant seeds and get him to, play his idol and be scared, because that gives them an extra Tribal Council to wiggle around, really, because if he keeps that idol, that's another idol, another Tribal Council where he could be safe. So really, they're trying to take all the threats off the board at the moment, so they can really eliminate who they want to get rid of, and they can just go down the line and go Dante, Jark, Corbus, and whoever else is after that, Mamba, and really make sure that there's no threats on the board, so that Rob, Steffi, and Nicole have the clearest path to the end at this point.
100%. What do you think would have happened in the immunity challenge if Durao and Nicole went all the way? Because Nicole did pretty impressive there. What would the tiebreaker have been in that challenge?
I don't know. Do they go to fire? I don't know.
Do they fight for it? Like Wu would have asked them.
Maybe they go all the way back to round one and they have to do 1, 2, and 3 in order. Who knows? I mean, yeah, I don't know what would happen there. Maybe scissors, paper, rock. Who knows? But it's something. Obviously, we didn't end up seeing that. I think they just create a 4th round in that point and really just go until someone gets the sequence.
Probably, yeah.
Jarrell obviously filling that one out. And again, something I didn't touch on there was Mike, when he returned from reward, going straight back to Rob, which again, like Jarrell's been doing with Rob, Mike is coming back to him and letting him know of everything that's happening in the game, which is the perfect position for Rob to be in. And he also does show that Mike is loyal to Rob and potentially bumps him up a little bit. And, him knowing that, 1, Dante is willing to get rid of Corbus, and 2, that they really need to scare Jark. And 3, obviously, Dante is coming up against him and he's trying to build a coalition to ultimately surmount Rob's alliance. So for Rob to be aware of that and have these people like Mike and a Jarrell that he can really trust to provide that information back to him, it's a good position that Rob's in right now. And it does allow him not only to dictate the votes, but also to say, well, I'm not the one in charge here. Everyone else has been telling me all these things. Mike's been saying this, Jarrell's been saying this. It's just as much their responsibility that person got voted out than it is mine. So he really is creating parachutes and also people that he can kind of fall back on and say it was their plan, not his. And obviously at this point in the game, it's a good thing to do because it does keep the target off your back and puts it on someone else, especially someone like Mike, who we know is a very strategic player at this point. So I think it's good in both ways, that it gives Rob that knowledge of what's going on, but it also gives him a chance that if something goes belly up, he has someone to say, well, it was his idea in the first place. So a win-win situation where he really has a couple of options here.
Yeah, 100%. And the only other 2 things here that we probably should touch on is that Mubba decides that, I really like Mubba, throughout the show. Again, just looking at her here, she's such a sweet person. Like, her and Dante, they just didn't get along prior to the merge. And, Dante was calling her a weak player, someone that shouldn't be in the game. But here, his fate is now in Mubba's hands. And Mubba has given her word to Dante that she would not turn against him, and she can't get it over her heart to do this when, she's just promised Dante that she would work with her. And for me, Mubba is someone like that I feel like I would be really great friends with in real life. Like she comes across as one of the more likable people that's still left in the game. And, when you're a normal, good person like that, that's great for life, but in Survivor, people will take advantage of that and they will trample on you. And sadly, I think, Mubba, again, she's with Quibus and Jark. She's on that railway. She's tied to the railway and the freight train is coming, and she's going to be like a deer in headlights when it hits her. The other part here as well is that, we see that Doral again goes to Rob as well. He says that I can't vote tonight. I've just been given this, like he told him that I was given this advantage. So Rob, again, because he's got all this information, he can now put the contingency plans in place to make sure that the vote still goes the way that he wants it to go. And then lastly here, like you said, Jark is feeling uncomfortable. He does say that, his alliance could blindside him, but he says that if he uses the idol tonight, he's going to get voted out the next night in any case. So he might as well try and hold on to it tonight so that he's got another chance in this game, which I feel like is the right play. I feel like a lot of players will get lambasted if they were to go out in this spot. But I feel like he's got the read on it. He understands he's on the out here pretty firmly going into this tribal council. Now, tribal council is going to be interesting. We have Nico asking who feels at risk here, and Dante and Jark immediately puts up their hands. So clearly Jark he knows this now. He knows that they're coming for him. Then there's the question that's being asked about loyalty in the game. And Steffi goes really hard on Jark here and sort of puts out there that if there are certain people that have got certain advantages in the game, shouldn't that put them at a higher threat and someone that they should take out? And Jark point blank asks her, are you talking about me? And she says, yes, I am. And he says that it's pretty hypocritical of you to come at me when you've just turned your back on me and Sipe and Quibus the vote before, and you're saying I'm not being truthful in this situation. So a really, really interesting back and forth here that is happening in this one. And Steffi is, I feel like she's really just not thinking outside of her own, what she wants to happen in this game at the moment. She feels hard done by it. But sadly, Jark's not playing the game for her. He's playing the game for himself, and he's trying to get to the end.
Yeah, I think it is a good move by Steffi, though, to really put that target on Jark and try and flush out that audible. Obviously, as you mentioned there, Jark knows that if he doesn't go out this tribal council, he's going out the next tribal council. So really, he should save on to that idol if he can, and use that later down the line, give him more security, because he does know that obviously Dante's the target numero uno at the moment because he's a big physical immunity threat. So he's probably the one that they will vote for, and we'll see how the votes play out when they split the vote. But I think it was Corbus who mentioned that it was kind of like picking up loose change, and people were being picked off one by one in this alliance, and you had this sort of dominant player, and everyone underneath were being just picked up and taken off the board, really. And that's something that people had to be aware of going forward, because if you're not 100% sure of your place in the alliance, perhaps you're not going to be going to the end, and you need to start making contingency plans, especially when you've got people like Steffi and Rob who have so much power at the moment, and you're starting to see that people like Jark and Corbus are being ostracized from this group of 7. It was obviously the alliance that was put in place, and they're being blindsided. So it makes people kind of think at the moment, if Jark and Corbus can be blindsided, well, what about me? What's my position in this Bitch Shake 7? Do I have a future in this alliance? And as I said before, I think it's too early to think about it now, but certainly in these next couple of votes, when we start to get down to 7 or 8 people, that's really when you need to start to kick it up in high gear, and you can bring in these smaller groups, these groups of 4 or 5, as opposed to having to bring in 6 or 7 to get that majority. So it gives you a little bit of time to think about it, but also, obviously Jark and Corbus at the moment, they want to make sure that they can start planting these seeds. So in the next couple of tribal councils, they can really flip the script and kind of save face at the moment, because it does seem that Jark or Corbus at this point are the next to go after Dante. So yeah, see how that plays out. But yeah, Jark has been kind of pressured to play the idol, but ultimately he doesn't go on to play the idol, which I think is a great move by Jark, just to hold on to that, because we obviously saw earlier in the season he was a little bit pissed off that he played the idol for Ting Ting. And I think that's something that's still kind of playing on his mind. And we obviously know, as we'll touch on in episode 13 as well, that the family visit is supposed to be coming up, and that's something he wants to get to. So to give him at least a couple more tribal councils under his belt, it does give him more of a chance to reach the end and potentially have that family visit. And that's a big milestone that he's looking forward to at the moment. He's not necessarily looking toward the final 3 or 4 at the moment. He's more looking to the family visit and then seeing where it can go from there. And I think that's a smart move by Jark, just to play it by day and really hold on to hope and try and reassure his position in the alliance and know that people are going to come after me, but they know I have this safety blanket, so they're always going to be making contingency plans until it's too late and I can get further in the game.
100%. If you survive another day in the game, then things can change every single day. New people are going to go against each other. New alliances can get formed. You just need another day to have another opportunity here. And just to correct you there, it wasn't Quibbers, it was Dante who spoke about the loose change. So I don't want any of the listeners to listen to it and think, Riley doesn't know what he's talking about. He meant Dante, okay, guys? So Dante talked about the loose change. Dante is also the person that ends up getting voted out in this spot. And from my perspective, Dante is someone that I would love to see play the game again. I felt like Dante had a lot of the right reads in the game. His execution was off at times, but I feel like he's someone that if he did go back and watch the season, and if he saw where he potentially could have been a little bit different in his approach and trying to get people to align with him and how to do things, he could go out there and be really successful. He's got all of the makings for someone that could win this show in Survivor South Africa. He's a really good competitor. He's got good reads. He needs to adapt his social game slightly, but from talking to other people that have played the game with them, he was actually quite well liked by a lot of people on the show as well. So those are things we didn't see. But I also think that Dante is someone that when you bring him back for another season, he's going to add a lot to you, because if he's at the bottom, he's going to scrape, he's going to fight, he's going to try to collect all the loose change in the middle of the center console of the car so that it equates to a lot of money by the end of the month. And he's going to try and do something. And that's what we like to see. Now, episode 13, Jark says that he survived an assassination attempt last night at Tribal, and he thinks that they're vain for attacking him because, they haven't been 100% honest with him as well. Him and Quibbers are completely in the out here. They know this, and they're going to have to scramble from the bottom throughout this whole episode to try and get back into the good graces of the 7. Steffi says that she doesn't want to explain anything to Jark because, she wanted the person to leave that left, and they left. So she doesn't feel like she needs to, apologize for the fact that she targeted Jark because Dante went home, So again, it would have been interesting to see, should Steffi get there towards the end of the game, how does she pitch her case? Because it feels like, similar to Dante, she's burning a lot of bridges at this point. It's great TV. I don't know how it's going to translate to the end, but we also saw that in season 6 that sometimes people can be pretty brutally honest and straightforward in Survivor South Africa and still get the votes at the end of the season. So who knows? She could have probably still gotten there. Steffi also talks to Durao and Mike at the well the next day, and she says that Jark Quibbers are sucking up to the jury too much and that they're starting to become jury threats as well now. And I feel like maybe this is a little bit of them just putting more and more targets on Jark and Quibbers' back, because we haven't really seen at this point that the jury has been rooting for Quibbers or Jark in any way. So I feel like this is her painting an additional target here on their backs.
Yeah, and I mean, Jark and Quibbers, they're really now more alert than ever before that they're on the outs here. And also something that I found really interesting is Nicole was not assured at all of her position in the tribe, especially when talking with Steffi. She kind of felt like, why isn't she apologizing? Why? Because they had this agreement from the start of the merge, really, this Spit Shake 7 alliance. And Steffi's kind of starting to think, well, perhaps I can't trust them as much as I used to, because if Corvus, who she's obviously grown really close with on the Secrets a couple episodes ago, if he can be blindsided and is part of this alliance, then what about me? What's my position in the game? Because she's starting to recognize that, perhaps Rob and Steffi are a bit more cutthroat than she actually thought. And even though we know that she's definitely close with...
I didn't read it that way. I didn't feel like Nicole was... I didn't feel like she was completely out. Like, I feel like she, very much with Rob, has been a part of the votes up until this point. I don't feel like that, but I feel like she was getting annoyed with Steffi because Steffi was playing the higher moral ground here, saying that, how can Jar go against her? But she was just saying that's not the way it is, because Steffi has also turned her back on people she's promised that she wouldn't turn her back on, like Sipe being one of the amigos, for instance. Nicole's done the same thing. I think Nicole's just being a realist here, that, she wanted to play the game with integrity, but at the end of the day, everybody has got to make some blurred line decisions, like she calls it. But I don't think that Nicole, for me, I could be wrong. We can ask this question to Nicole when she comes on the podcast at some stage. I didn't feel like she was ever out. In fact, one of the things for me in this episode that's really interesting, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here because we're talking about Nicole now, and we can definitely address it later on again as well, is that, when Jark goes to Mike to try and pull Mike in to do a counter vote to Rob and Nicole and all of those people that are in the inside of the Seven Alliance, Mike says that there's certain people that won't turn their back on him, and he feels like he doesn't need to save Quibus at this stage in the game because he's got the numbers. Nicole's with him, and that was very telling for me, because that really shows that Nicole played an exceptional game where Quibus thought she had him. Mike thought that she was with him. I feel like she actually did like a lot of work socially to keep Rob off people's names, because she was promising a lot to Mike. She was promising a lot to Quibus. I feel like there's a lot to her game that we didn't see on the show. And in some ways, it makes me wonder, how close was her game really to Rob's game when it came to the social side of it? How close was it to how in she was with everyone? I feel like she was a lot stronger player than the edit even showed us from this episode.
Yeah, I think that more so with Steffi, she's getting a little bit rubbed the wrong way with how she is handling people around camp, and especially Corbus. I mean, they have built that close bond on the Island of Secrets, so she doesn't really want to see him out of the game. And I do think she is starting to realize that this alliance isn't all too strong, and there are starting to form cracks a little bit, I suppose. So to bring in someone like Corbus would be a plus for her, but obviously we know that he's viewed as the next big threat on the board. Obviously him and Jark, to Rob's plan to get to the end. So it is going to be a little bit of a toss-up here. We did go to the reward challenge, Chris, and I really like this, how they split it up into 3 different sections. So we had the food challenge, the advantage challenge, and obviously the loved ones challenge. And I think there's a little bit of strategy in here as well, because we don't know what everyone is going to pick. So the common sense will tell you everyone's going to be playing for the loved ones letters, or perhaps the advantage, and no one's going to be playing for the food. So yeah. I can't think you have to be thinking on a certain level as to what people are going to pick, because obviously the advantage is going to put a massive target on your back, and you think too few people will be playing that one because they know there will be a big target. The loved ones challenge is probably going to have the more competition, whereas the food challenge you'd think would have the least competition, and it does play out that way. But the way if I was approaching this challenge, I'd go in with the intention of playing for the advantage, but I know that would put a target on my back. So if I was sort of assured of my place in the alliance, I wouldn't go for that. I'd instead go for the food reward, knowing that people that get the loved ones reward then get a target on their back because they get that letter from home. I think it's a little bit of thinking, what reward can I play for without getting the least amount of lashback if I win, I suppose.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I love the challenge. I love the fact that we've got 3 different options here and 3 different times that people are going to go up against each other. For me, the family letters, this whole episode was a lot of people crying about their family, not being able to hear back from them and things like that. And maybe I'm a cold bastard, but I've lived away from my family since the age of 18, and I've lived all around the world. Sometimes I don't talk to them for a month. Like, it's okay. I think I'll be all right. I don't need the letter. I just don't. And it'd probably be so different when you're out there. Probably. Like, you're probably feeling like everybody's coming at your head. So to hear something from someone who actually cares for you and doesn't want to vote you out of the game or kill you, you probably will be happy to hear from them. But I just don't get it. Like, for me, if I'm in this situation, especially if I'm Quibus and Jark, I didn't understand why they went for I think Quibus went for the food. Jark ended up going for the loved one letter. And for me, like, I just don't understand it. They both know that they're at the bottom. They need something in this game to win. And the other thing with me is if I was playing this game, I would have done what Rob did, most likely. I mean, unless I was really, I feel like if you look at the best players that have ever played this game, they take the risky move. You're there to play this game once. I don't want to die. I don't want to sit there one day and think, oh, I was voted out in this episode because I didn't go for the advantage. I would go for the advantage. I think Rob did the right thing. I think it shows why he ended up winning the show because he wasn't scared to take the chances that needed to be taken. When him and Mubba went up against each other, I mean, we knew that, Mubba is a lovely person. She wasn't going to beat Rob in this challenge. And Rob ends up getting this. But I think the one curveball that Nico throws out to Rob there is when he says, you're now going to have to read the clue in front of everyone. And similar to him, I would have bricked myself. It was like if I was in front of everybody and I had to read the advantage. And in his case, luckily it says he needs to go to the island. So the bad thing for him here is no one knows what he's going to get there. But then again, the way that Rob's mind works, the way that a Tony Vlacho's mind works, these kind of guys, they lie about their advantages. Rob goes to the Island of Secrets. No one knows what he got. And he comes back with an ingenious plan because obviously what he gets in an advantage is an advantage for one specific immunity challenge. So they've done it now twice in a row where they give someone an advantage to winning the next immunity challenge. I don't mind it when they do this every now and again. I do have a problem with it if too many of the immunity challenges, they're going to start doing it because I do feel like everybody needs to have an equal opportunity in most of those immunity challenges. But the one thing that I do take my hat off to them for take my hat off for Rob to, is that he goes back and he creates this fake advantage where he says that for the next couple of votes, I can choose to see anyone's vote that I want to see. And if that happens, the chances are less that people are going to turn their backs against him or going to try and blindside him, which I thought was a brilliant lie. So he's doubling down on this advantage, and for him, it's a great move.
It does play into fear a little bit there with his idea and strategy there. But I do want to touch back on the reward challenge just really quickly. Nicole and Jarrell battling for food, and Jarrell sort of steps down to give Nicole that, and obviously Curry in favour in the meantime. And we also see Mike doing the same with Steffi, ultimately stepping out to give Steffi that loved one letter, and give her that opportunity to sit on the beach and reflect on home and what people are thinking. And I think for someone like Mike, he probably doesn't. I don't want to say this, but he probably doesn't need it as much as someone like Steffi, who feels a little bit on an island of her own, obviously missing her husband a lot. I'm sure everyone would benefit from that one, but it also, as I mentioned before, you don't want to put too much of a target on your back. And when you give that up to someone else, not only does it curry favor with that other person, but it also means that people don't despise you for winning that letter from home as well. So I think you got to play up where you really stand in that. If it is for something like a letter from home, and I'm a bit like you, I'm a little bit cold-hearted. I don't think I'd be as keen on getting that letter from home. As much as I love him, I feel like 50 days in Australian Survivor, I could survive without, hearing from my family just a letter. As nice as it be, but I do. Plus, like
Rob
how
talks about it, right? Rob talks about it. It takes you out of the game, and I would be so afraid of it taking me out of game mode. Like when I'm out there, I want to take souls. I don't want to be thinking about the lovely guy outside of the game. So I think he brought up a great point while he was sort of going through the letters.
Yeah, and you do want to make sure that your mind is fully in the game. You're right. And for Rob to go to the Island of Secrets, to obviously create that fake advantage, but also be given that food to fuel him and the loved one's letter, I think that does fuel him and add more fuel to the fire. Ultimately, that steak did look really tasty, so I think it would have to go for the food in the end. But yeah, we see that the Amigos and the original Lau Mei really unite here to begin to split the votes between Jark and Corbus, and it really does seem as though Jark and Corbus are going to be the next ones to go, no matter what, and they're really going to start to push for Jark to play that idol now, because obviously he hasn't. He didn't play his idol at the last chance, and they really need to get rid of that idol now because it's going to cause problems down the line. And ultimately, I mean, if he survives this next tribal council without playing his idol, it's going to be probably another tribal council where he plays his idol, and then ultimately, two tribals down the track where they can get rid of him, and that does leave a lot of room for scrambling to happen. So they really need to start pinning that target on Jark and making him think that he's the next one to go over Corbus, and that he really needs to play the idol to keep him safe in the game.
So the only other two things here prior to the immunity challenge is Quiver's working really hard with the Spit Shaker 7 to try and get them to stay true for just one more vote. And he's kind of desperate at this point because he knows that they're coming for him. You also get Jark here talking to Quiver separately, and he tells him about the reward steal. And he says that, if you get me to the family reward, then I will steal the family reward, and you and me will get to see our family on the island. And Jark has been talking about this quite a lot throughout the game. And it's something that I find quite interesting because I feel like the moment that you go and steal someone's family reward in the game is also the moment you lose the game. And he had this idea about doing it very early on in the game. And if I'm someone out there that sees someone else doing that in the game, I feel like even though I don't care that much about the family letters and things like that, if your family flies all the way out there, if you steal my family reward, you better, bitter jury, yes, I will be the queen out there of bitter juries. Like, I will be out there and be like, no ways I'm voting for this person. I'm voting for whoever else. Darrell, you're getting my vote. I don't care. Because at the end of the day, that to me is like the ultimate thing. And I feel like Jark looking at that as an option to me is still very shocking. But I do think that him using it as a tool to get Quibus to continue to be loyal with him is really good. The problem is just that him and Quibus together are not enough to turn the tide here. And he's going to later on start talking to Mike about this as well, which I don't know if it's a good thing. Mike probably will start talking about it. But this whole episode, again, it kind of made me think about this whole thing. How bad is it if people start knowing about your idol? If people know about the idol, they can try and get it out of you. They can turn against you. They can use that against you. So I feel like, again, it's biting Jark in the butt that he told people about his idol. But it probably got him to the merge in the first place, because Sipe saw that as a potential thing that she can use when they get to the merge. But he's just in a really bad spot here. Now, going into the immunity challenge, they have to balance a ball on a bow, and they have to walk through an obstacle course while balancing this ball. And at the end of it, they've got the snake table that they've got to balance this ball on and basically land the ball into these little holes on it. And there's 3 little holes that they need to sort of match it with. And obviously, Rob has had the opportunity to train and get ready for this, and he does extremely well throughout the challenge, and he does end up winning it. But hats off to Quibus and Jark for giving him a real battle there at the end. It was actually pretty close. So I do feel like if Rob didn't get that advantage, he may not have been the person who would have won that immunity. And it's the second one so far this season. So he's potentially showing that he could be a threat in immunity challenges going forward.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, those immunity challenges, if you're starting to pull out, it does add a little bit to his target. But I think, as we saw with the last episode in Jarrell winning immunity, it really is just a matter of not letting the target get individual immunity, especially with Jark. And Jark got to keep that idol for another tribal council no matter what. It does give them more options to go forward, obviously. And now they know that Corpse and Jark don't have immunity. So even if Jark plays his idol, we know that Corpus can go no matter what. But when we go back to camp, Jark does do a little bit of scrambling, and he goes back to Mamba, Mike, and also Letitia, and tries to get them on his side and working with him in the future. And also, as you mentioned earlier there, talking to Mike, who is someone that, again, like Jark, is a big Survivor super fan, and he's wanting to make big moves. Although with Mike, we've seen that he is a loyal player. And even though he was loyal to Jeffrey, he recognized that he didn't have a future with him. So instead, he shifted his loyalty to Rob, who he sees an end, going to the end with Rob. So I think Mike is someone that he wants to make big moves, but it's too early for him. And he has this implicit trust in Rob at the moment that he doesn't want to go up against him, because he recognizes that Rob, especially given how he's won 2 immunity challenges up to this point, he's a big threat. And you really don't want to be going up against him, especially when we know he has idols, as I said before, and his physical prowess as well. So going against him isn't the best point of call at this point. But I do think it is the right move for Jark to sort of persuade Mike and keep him, on his good side, because it means that Mike is someone that's close to Rob, and he's someone that can say, let's keep Jark around for another tribal council or 2, because it gives Jark more options to go to the family visit, as he said. That's his goal in the game, and he doesn't want to use that reward steal against everyone else. And it also means that in the end, it gives Mike someone to fall back on, and also it gives him some control in the game to know where things lie And even if Mike does want to turn his back, he can just say to Rob, Jark has the rewards deal. Let's get rid of him now. So it gives him more power in the game, I suppose. But then again, I think it's the right move for Jark to make in the sense that Rob, no matter what, is going to cut him. Whereas I think Mike is sort of thinking it more rationally, and he's thinking of how can I use Jark to build my game, and can I bring him to the end, or even to the family visit, and keep him alive for a couple more votes to gain his trust and potentially even get his jury vote in the end. So I think to go to Mike is probably the right move for him, because he knows that Laumea are probably the more flexible part of this alliance. And, he can carry that favour and try to be carried through to the family visit there.
Yeah, and I mean, Jark doesn't just go to Mike on the spot. He also approaches Durao and Maba as well to try and gain some allies there. But I feel like Mike is probably the person that's the most open to doing something here. And also, he needs Mike on board, really, to make it happen. Because if Durao, Maba, Mike, Quibus and Jark all come together, then that's a very solid alliance that actually could upset the flow of the game at this stage. But like I said earlier, Mike tells Jark at this point that he trusts Nicole and that he doesn't want to make a move against Nicole. So he kind of tells us who's the person here that he trusts more in the game, that he thinks he can use down the line to go against Rob. I feel like Nicole must have told Mike at some point off air that she was willing to cut Rob, to get Mike to believe her that much, or to pull Mike that much in, so that he's quite closely aligned with her. I think the rest of the points here prior to the tribal we've actually discussed throughout the episode already, some of the other things that's happened. So I guess we go into tribal council. Rob says that no one is ever safe unless they have the immunity idol on their neck. And he says that tonight it's only him and Jark. So Jark comes into this tribal council with the immunity idol already hanging on his neck and telling everybody that he's got no intention not to play it tonight. He will be playing it because, he said, all I've been talking about with everybody on this tribe since I've played the game is how much I want to make it to the family visit. I want to see my wife when she comes out here, and I'm not going to take a chance with my life in this game and then not have the opportunity to see her. So I will be playing it. And he also says here, he doubles down on the bluff, and he says that I didn't even bring my bag with me tonight. That's how confident I am that I will be going back because I'm playing this idol. And, throughout this, I feel like his bluff and the way that he talks is quite interesting, and it works really well. And at the end of it here, obviously, he ends up not playing it, which is, again, the right move to this tribal council, because that, again, allows for him to have for another one. And this is going to lead into an extremely explosive encounter into the next episode. And you can see that everybody in the tribe here, they're humiliated by the fact that he just outplayed them. Jark made all of them look dumb in front of the jury here. And it's one of my favorite moments, if not my favorite moment of the season, when Jark did this, when he closed his shirt with the idol still being in there. He's such a great showman. And if Jark is not back for an all-star season in Survivor South Africa, or if he doesn't play in an international versus US type season, we will have to riot, if that doesn't happen, because I reckon, again, he's just showing here. And I wanted to add another thing before. I know you want to say something on this, but I wanted to add the way that Jark has been wheeling and dealing with the idols, the way that he's been wheeling and dealing with his advantages and using these mechanics to try and work with people. I feel like Jark would do extremely well with fire tokens in the game as well. I really feel like he is the player in Survivor South Africa that would adapt the most easiest to the current state of the US game compared to a lot of these other players. I've mentioned this before. It would be interesting to see if Rob could emulate his gameplay when it comes to playing in a US type of season, because I feel like it's such a unique, it's extremely powerful, but I don't know if he would be able to emulate it to the same degree. And I would love to see it happen and for him to try.
And I certainly hope it does happen one day. And you're right, Jark is someone that I think is almost certain going to be on a future All-Star season for South African Survivor, or of course an international Survivor season, if he wants to come back. And I really hope he does, because you're right, Rob and Jark have been two very dominant players, two very entertaining players. And yeah, Jark to me is a cross between Adam Klein, I suppose, and Tony Vlachos. He's got all the showman skills of Tony, but he also, or Rick Devens, I suppose, is a good comparison there. He's a super fan and also a showman. He's really a big character, and he's so excited to be playing. He's so excited to be coming off the bottom and making these big moves. And also, obviously having those strategic chops as well and finding those idols as well. So he's a really entertaining player, and I really did like that Jark has been coming off the bottom all this season, and he's been playing a very aggressive game. And there's been so many times where people could get him out, but they haven't gone all the way. And I do think it's sort of a knock against Rob and Steffi's alliance, this dominant alliance here, that they don't put more votes on Jark, and basically assure
100%.
themselves that if Jark doesn't play his idol, then he goes home no matter what. Because they've got the numbers here to split however they want. So why don't they put more votes on Jark than they do Corbus? So then they know that no matter what that outcome of the game, if he plays it, it's out. If he doesn't play it, he's out. So I think that's.
And it's interesting. Can we touch on that? Can we touch on that specific point? So Steffi, earlier in the episode, she's the one who's pretty adamant that they need to put the majority votes on Jark. She says this more than once throughout the episode. So she's the one that said, let's put the majority on Jark. So if he doesn't play it, he's out, and put the second highest against Quibus. So I would like to know who's the person who changed that plan, because I noticed that when I watched the episode. I don't know if you noticed that, but Steffi, she's got a pretty killer instinct for this game. You know, I don't agree with her getting upset with Jark here, obviously, after he does this, or the way that she gets upset with him. But she's actually a pretty decent player in her own right. So I would be very interested to know who changed the plan. Because like you said, if this was a seasoned, experienced alliance, you know, and if it's one of the best alliances to ever play the game, they would have put the majority votes on Jark if Jark was truly the person that they wanted to go home. Unless they must have decided behind the scenes that we still want Quibus to go home because he's more of a physical threat than what Jark is. And he's our target before Jark, and then Jark can go next, but we'll get him to flush his idol here. But well done on Jark for having the balls not to play his idol here, because we saw him misplay it earlier in the season. And I feel like he's now twice in a row made up for the misplay that he had earlier in the season by not playing it.
Yeah, and you're right. It is a 5-2-2 split vote. So they have 7 votes to play with, and they can do a 4-3 split. And I was just looking at the votes then, and it's only Letitia and Mike that vote for Jark there, which is kind of strange to think about. Those two vote for Mike, for Jark, sorry. But yeah, I don't know where that plan changed, and it would be something fascinating to touch back on later in the season when we get some of these people to discuss the game. I do think it is a big knock against them because, if I was in Jark's position, I could never do that, knowing that they have the dominant numbers and they can ultimately pull off this move here. So, yeah, congrats to Jark. It was a great move to play, and hats off to him. You know, to have the balls to pull off a move like that is something that very few Survivor players have. I mean, you look at people like James or someone like Kat or Chelsea in recent seasons where they have the idol and they don't play it. I think, you know, to almost not play the idol and have that factor where if I get voted out, I've got pie in my face and I'm voted out with an idol in my pocket, the ultimate embarrassment in Survivor. And to ultimately avoid that and hold on to your idol and have the balls to go forward, I think is a great move for Jark, and it does set him up for at least one more tribal council. So it gives him 6 more days then to maneuver and try and make more moves in the game, and you know, try and see where his future lies, and if he can make any cracks in the alliance, which I don't think he can, but it certainly will be interesting when we touch on the next episode next week, Chris, to see Jark's reaction when he comes back to camp and everyone else's reactions as well. It's a little bit explosive, so something to look forward to there.
Yeah, 100%. So final thoughts on Quibus from my end. You know, he was an interesting character throughout the season. I feel like he had a lot of promise. I feel like he was someone that came into the show not knowing the show. There was a lot of times where he was quite naive to the inner workings of the show early on, and he didn't want to strategize a lot. He somehow did become quite a big force, and obviously got himself into a very dominant Spit Shaker 7 alliance that he was a part of, and some would say he was the founding member, having tea with the ladies when they discussed the Spit Shaker 7 coming together with Letitia and Sipe. And I feel like Quibus was an interesting character. I don't know if I want to see him again, but I wouldn't be angry at seeing him again on my screen either. You know, I always like someone that talks about themselves in the third person. It's always makes for entertaining TV.
Yeah, Corby has been such a fun character this season. I mean, I really wouldn't fault any of these characters if they returned. It really is such a strong cast, and people are playing a really strong game, which I like to see. And even though we have these 7-person alliances, we're starting to see that they're not built in place, and there are these assurances where things can really go any which way. And there are a lot of moving parts of this season, and I think that does come down to the amount of people that are playing on this cast. And it's not just people like Jark, Mike, and Rob that are running the game. It's also the lesser people below that, like Jarrell and Steph, who are also calling the shots. So it is a very balanced season at this point. Yeah, Corbus isn't someone that's on the top of my list to return, but I mean, I wouldn't be complaining if anyone from this season came back. And seeing some of the more recent episodes, how he's tried to scramble off the bottom but ultimately hasn't succeeded, and that relationship with Jark, to see those two come back together, I think in the future would be really interesting to see how they play off each other, and really can they work together in the future, and where do they lie in the future of the game. So yeah, Corbus, really fun character. Shame to see him go so early, but it seems like it's the Rob show at the moment. Chris is playing a very, very dominant game, and no one seems to be able to stop him.
Yeah, 100%. So, guys, it's been great having you here. We will be back this weekend to talk about Survivor Island of Secrets, episodes 14 and 15. And also, we will be back to talk about Immunity Island. Myself and Riley will be going through the cast videos and their bios before the weekend to come back to you guys and analyze who we think are going to be the top contenders, the middle contenders, and those who we don't think will do so well. Let's hope, Riley, we don't get it all wrong and have egg on our face by the end of it. It's going to be the first time ever that we're going to analyze these guys. And I have already maybe seen the video of one or two of them so far. And there's going to be, I feel like you spoke about a lot of good characters on this season. I feel like next season, Survivor South Africa has even gone out there and have gotten even better characters so far. I feel like it's a season full of characters. The 4 or 5 that I've already sort of had a look at, they look all like they're going to mean business when they're out there. And one of the things I look for in a good Survivor season is I want interesting people. And I feel like they got interesting people to play this game, not just game bots.
Yeah, it's been a very long off season. So, I mean, Survivor South Africa, a month around the corner. I'm so excited to get into it. So, yeah, I've got to do some research over the weekend and look at this cast, but really excited to see what happens. And yeah, look forward to diving into the next episode, and also Survivor Season 8 cast preview next weekend as well.
100%. So guys, if you like this content, please hit the subscribe button. We hope we earned your subscription today. Hit the notification bell, give us a like. All of those things help with the YouTube algorithm, and we will be back this weekend to talk to you guys again. Have a good one. Goodbye.